Just hours before Doug's wedding, his friends face a mystery. They can't find him, they don't remember a thing from the bachelor party, and now they're stuck with a stolen police car, a baby in their care, and on top of it all, one of them accidentally married an escort. The story begins with 4 friends, Stu, Doug, Phil, and Alan, who head to Las Vegas to celebrate Doug's bachelor party. But 5 hours before the wedding, Tracy, the bride-to-be, receives a call from Phil out in the desert. He tells her they've lost Doug, and he doesn't think he'll make it to the wedding. Tracy panics.
2 days earlier, Alan, Doug's future brother-in-law, is getting ready for the wedding. Alan is a bit peculiar, the kind of guy who could make even a handshake awkward. He's not sure about going to Las Vegas since he knows fitting in isn't exactly his strength, but Doug convinces him, telling him it's no big deal and reminding him that he's his brother now too.
Sid, Doug's future father-in-law, lends them his Mercedes on the condition that only Doug drives it. Doug and Alan set out to pick up their friends. First, they collect Phil, a high school teacher with a wife and a son. Phil is at school, gathering money from his students for a supposed school activity, but in reality, it's to fund his Las Vegas adventure.
Then they pick up Stu, a dentist trapped in a relationship with Melissa, who controls every aspect of his life. To avoid problems, Stu lies and tells her they're going to a vineyard, since Melissa believes bachelor parties are pathetic and strip clubs are disgusting. Stu pretends to agree with everything she says, and Melissa replies that she wishes his friends were as mature as he is. Right at that moment, the others pull up, yelling a mocking nickname for Stu from outside.
Already in the car, Phil sarcastically comments on how hard it was to leave his wife and son behind to go to Las Vegas with his friends. Between laughs, he jokes that he hates his life and might just stay in Vegas forever. During a stop, Stu admits that Melissa bought the story about the vineyards. Phil questions why, after 3 years together, he still has to lie to her. Stu replies that it's easier to lie than to fight. Phil reminds him that Melissa cheated on him with a cruise ship bartender, but Stu downplays it, saying she was drunk.
They finally arrive in Las Vegas and check in at Caesar's Palace. Phil asks for a $4,200 a night villa, leaving Stu to hand her the bill. Stu, worried about Melissa's anger, hesitates to agree, but the receptionist reassures him that nothing will be charged until checkout. With that, Stu takes a deep breath and gives in. Alan then asks if Caesar actually lived there, and the receptionist, with all the patience in the world, explains that he didn't. The friends arrive at their spectacular suite with an impressive view. As they get ready for the night, Stu tells them he's planning to propose to Melissa with his grandmother's old ring. Phil immediately calls it a huge mistake, reminding him that Melissa has even hit him before. Stu, as always, justifies her behavior, saying it only happened a couple of times and that he probably deserved it. He goes on to explain that they've been together for 3 years and marriage is simply the next step. That's how things are supposed to work, he says. Suddenly, Alan appears excited, asking if they're ready to let the dogs out, referring to the song. Then they head up to the hotel terrace, where Alan confesses that he considers himself a lone wolf, a pack of one. But since meeting Doug and the others, his pack has grown. To seal the moment, he hands out drinks to everyone. In personality theory, Sigmund Freud proposed 3 main components that make up the psychic apparatus and explain how our mind works: the id, the ego, and the superego. When examining the personalities of each character, it's possible to interpret each one and the dynamics between them as representations of these components. Here's the explanation. The id is the most primitive and instinctive part of our mind. It is impulsive and irrational, operating under the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification without concern for social norms, consequences, or logic. The superego is the moral and ethical part of the mind. It's that inner voice that tells us what is right and wrong based on the norms, values, and prohibitions we learn from our parents and society. Its main function is to impose restrictions on behavior, especially when actions do not align with what it considers correct or ideal. The superego generates feelings of guilt or shame when we fail to meet its standards, and pride when we do. Finally, the ego acts as a mediator between the id and the superego. It functions like a manager,
assessing external reality, and finding ways to satisfy the id's demands in a manner that is acceptable to the social environment. These three components don't operate independently. They are constantly interacting with one another.
The id seeks immediate gratification of its desires. The superego sets limits with rules and norms, and the ego tries to mediate between the two while dealing with external reality. This dynamic can be seen in the characters of the movie. From now on, try to view each character and their actions as if they were representing one of these Freudian psychic concepts. Later, I'll tell you which is which, so you can see if you guessed correctly.
After the toast, the night goes on, and by the next morning, everything is chaos. The room is a mess, and no one remembers anything. Stu wakes up on the floor and notices that he's missing a tooth. Alan shows up in his underwear and, upon entering the bathroom, finds a tiger. He runs out screaming for no one to go in there. Meanwhile, they discover that Doug is missing and his cell phone is still in the room.
Suddenly, they hear a baby crying, and when they look around, they find a small child in the room. Stu says they can't leave the baby alone, so Alan straps it to himself like a kangaroo, and they go downstairs to look for Doug. They can't find him, so they try to piece the night together.
Alan finds a tooth in his pocket. Turns out it belongs to Stu. Meanwhile, Stu discovers a receipt for an $800 cash withdrawal at the Bellagio at 11 p.m. Alan also has a parking ticket from the hotel stamped at 5:15 a.m., and Phil is wearing a hospital wristband. They realize their first stop has to be the hospital. They need to find out exactly what happened that night.
Outside the hotel, they hand the parking ticket to the valet to bring the Mercedes. As they wait, they notice hotel staff removing a mattress from the top of a statue. It looks like someone threw it out the window during the night. The three exchange glances. That mattress belongs to Doug. When the valet returns, instead of the Mercedes, a police cruiser pulls up.
Everyone is stunned. Without hesitation, Phil urges them to get in. Amid the traffic, Stu nervously says this is illegal, but Phil snaps back that he never sees the fun in anything. Meanwhile, Alan is absolutely thrilled by the police car. Fed up with the traffic jam, Phil flips on the sirens and swerves onto the sidewalk, speeding ahead, leaving Stu one breath away from a full-blown panic attack.
At the hospital, a doctor explains they arrived under the influence of a substance called Rufus, which explains why they can't remember anything. He also mentions that Doug was with them, and they kept talking about a wedding at a small nearby chapel. The trio heads to the chapel, where the owner, Eddie, greets them with congratulations on last night's wedding. He even says that out of all the crazy people he's met, Stu was the wildest of them all.
Stunned, they explain they don't remember a thing. Eddie shows them photos as proof, and there it is. Stu got married to a girl named Jade. He gives them her address so they can find her. As they step outside, the guys start arguing. Stu says everything is ruined and suggests burning the police car, since it's evidence of a night that never should have happened.
Phil reminds him that he's a teacher with a family, and burning down a police car isn't exactly on his list of solutions. Just then, a group of Asian gangsters shows up, demanding they return Mr. Chow, whom they believe has been captured. Tensions rise when Eddie steps out and gets shot. Amid the chaos, the friends flee in the police car, baby and all, and make their way to Jade's house. There they discover that Jade is an escort who actually married Stu, and that the baby is his. Jade, still enchanted with Stu, kisses him. Then Stu realizes that the ring he had planned to give Melissa is now on Jade's finger. She mentions that the last time she saw Doug was at the wedding. At that moment, the police arrive and arrest them for stealing a car. At the station, Phil calls Tracy from the police station phone and tells her they got an extra night free at the hotel, so they'll be returning the next day. Shortly after, the officers inform them that they've confiscated their Mercedes since they found it parked in the middle of the boulevard at 5 a.m. However, they will get their car back if they agree to volunteer for a taser demonstration with a group of children. After a while of pain and humiliation, they retrieve the Mercedes. As they drive, they hear a voice coming from the trunk. Believing it's Doug, they open it, but instead, a naked Asian man suddenly leaps out, hits them, and escapes. Alan finally confesses that he mixed substances into the drinks he gave them on the rooftop before leaving, thinking it was ecstasy. He wanted them to have fun, and he knew they wouldn't have accepted it if he had told them. Stu loses his patience and yells at Alan, saying he lost a tooth and ended up married to a lady of the night, but Phil intervenes to calm them down.
Taking charge, he suggests going back to the hotel to make some phone calls.
Here we can already identify which psychic component each character represents.
Alan embodies the id. He is practically pure instinct, has no filters, is chaos, and does not fit in socially. It's no surprise that Alan, by accidentally drugging them, causes the others to break free from their restraints and unleash their most basic impulses.
Just as he himself said, it was time to unleash the dogs, or rather, the id.
Stu represents the superego. He is a highly repressed person, completely controlled by his partner. He strives to be the person Melissa wants him to be in order to avoid conflict, which leads him to suppress his emotions and important parts of his identity. He also constantly tries to adhere to social norms. He plans to get married because he feels it's what's expected after the time they've been together, and the idea of breaking a rule or law causes him great anxiety, as we saw with the police car.
It's no surprise that Stu, being the most repressed of the group, experienced the most extreme release of his id when the substances overrode his restrictions and inhibitions, allowing him to act in a way completely unlike his usual self.
However, upon waking and regaining control of his superego, he felt intense guilt. He was also the most critical of Alan, thus illustrating the constant clash between the superego and the id. Finally, Phil aligns with the ego. He desired to escape the monotony of his life as a husband, father, and teacher, a dissatisfaction he did not hide, and saw the bachelor party as the perfect opportunity to fulfill that desire in a socially acceptable way.
Moreover, Phil has acted as the group's leader, mediating between Alan and Stu.
When these two clash, it is Phil who calms them down and takes charge, keeping the group moving forward. He's also the one who has tried to break through Stu's rigidity, attempting to make him reflect on his relationship.
With this, one of the reflections we can take from this story is the importance of learning to manage our desires in a conscious and responsible way. We all have impulses that need to be moderated. That is a natural part of living in society. But moderating does not mean denying. Continuously repressing our desires or emotions only feeds an inner shadow that will eventually seek an outlet.
And when it does, it may manifest in unpleasant or even harmful ways. That's why it's essential to allow ourselves to connect with those impulses, understand them, and give them appropriate space to express themselves, always with responsibility and without causing harm to ourselves or others.
Back at the hotel, they remember there's a tiger in their room. When they open the door, they come face to face with Mike Tyson himself, the tiger's owner. Tyson knocks Alan out with a single punch, but after hearing their story, he tells them that Doug left his jacket in the tiger's cage. Inside the jacket were the hotel room keys.
Tyson demands that they return the tiger in the exact same way they took it, promising to give them a clue about Doug in return. Alan decides to bury 5 roofies in a piece of meat, and Stu takes it to the tiger, who becomes unconscious after eating it. With the animal asleep, they return it to Mike Tyson's house.
There, Mike shows them a security video in which they see that at 3:30 a.m., Doug was with them at the property, acting wildly and taking the tiger. When they leave Tyson's house, a car crashes into them head-on. From the car steps Mr. Chow, the man they had left in the trunk, accompanied by his henchman. It turns out they met him at the casino the previous night, where they stole a bag containing $80,000 in chips. Chow reveals that he is holding Doug hostage and won't release him until they return his money. He gives them an ultimatum: meet him in the desert before sunset.
Back at the hotel, the group searches desperately for the money, but finds nothing. Then Alan, inspired by a blackjack book he's been reading, suggests winning the sum by gambling. Stu uses the $1,000 left in his account, and together with Alan and Jade, they sit down at the blackjack table. Incredibly, Alan demonstrates unexpected mathematical skills, and they manage to win enough to pay Chow.
They hand over the money, and he returns Doug, but it's not their Doug, but an African-American man who turns out to be the one who sold the roofies to Alan. Phil loses his patience and demands that Chow return the money and take back the fake Doug, but Chow flees. That's when Phil calls Tracy to tell her they've lost Doug. Just then, Stu remembers a crucial detail. In Las Vegas hotels, the windows can't be opened, so Doug couldn't have thrown the mattress onto the statue as they thought.
He realizes the whole thing was a prank. They had taken Doug up to the hotel roof on the mattress and completely forgotten about him. The three rush back to the hotel and find Doug on the rooftop, red as a lobster from sunburn.
But there are still problems. The wedding is in 3 hours and all flights to Los Angeles are full. Stu suggests driving instead. While waiting in the car, Stu sees Jade outside the hotel and thanks her for her help. She returns to him his grandmother's engagement ring, and he, laughing, admits he can't believe he gave something so important to someone he had just met. Jade reminds him he was so drunk he even knocked out one of his own teeth on a bet with Alan to prove he was a good dentist. Stu tells her he'll come back next week to take her out to dinner, and she accepts, thrilled.
The Mercedes arrives, though it's completely wrecked, and the friends speed off toward Los Angeles with Phil, the ego, at the wheel. Doug mentions that at least not everything was a disaster. He has $80,000 in chips in his pocket. The guys celebrate, even though they arrive late. Tracy forgives Doug, and the wedding takes place. Phil shares a moment with his family, kissing his wife and hugging his son. Meanwhile, Stu, drink in hand and standing beside Alan, takes the opportunity to break up with Melissa, telling her he's tired of her control and that this relationship no longer has a future for him.
In the end, through their experiences and interactions with one another, each of the characters seems to have achieved, albeit in a small way, some personal progress.
Having unleashed his id thanks to Alan, combined with Phil's arguments, helps Stu loosen his rigidity, release the anger he had been suppressing, and finally confront Melissa. And it's symbolic that this moment occurs while he's sharing a drink with Alan.
As if the id and the superego had finally found a point of balance, allowing him to express that repressed anger. Phil, on the other hand, although he expressed his dissatisfaction with this stage of his life, showed that deep down, he truly values what he has. While piecing together what had happened, he revealed his concern about losing his family and his job.
The experience served as a way for him to rediscover that, despite his frustrations, he is truly content with his life. In the end, after allowing himself a temporary escape without compromising anything important, he returned to his family renewed and with a clearer appreciation for his reality.
Alan, for his part, although still eccentric and chaotic, seems to have taken a small step toward greater social integration. Of course, this is only for now. Who knows, when they face something similar again, they might end up doing the exact same thing. In the end, Alan finds Stu's camera in the car. It's filled with photos of their disasters in Las Vegas. The friends promise to delete them, but not before taking one last look together. With everything we've discussed, and considering the movie's plot, there's something that makes me pause and reflect. If we really think about it, this story of an excessively wild night, one that isn't even remembered in the end, mirrors something we see all too often in our society. Many people, and probably ourselves at some point, live in eager anticipation of the weekend.
That moment of freedom to release all the tension and anxieties built up throughout the week. But what does that need to escape really mean? It seems we followed the same cycle over and over. We spend 5 days accumulating frustration, dealing with responsibilities, and going through a routine that perhaps doesn't fully fulfill us. Then the weekend arrives, and we release all that stress in an exaggerated way through activities that, rather than truly making us feel better, sometimes seem to merely numb something deeper.
This constant search for escapes might be telling us something very important. Perhaps we're settling for a life that doesn't truly satisfy us. What is it about our day-to-day lives that feels so unsatisfying, that we feel this constant and deep need to escape? Perhaps instead of trying to cover up that discomfort every weekend with nights of excessive recklessness, we should stop and actually listen to it. Perhaps it's pointing us toward the fact that there are aspects of our daily lives that need change, some attention, some deeper meaning, a more meaningful purpose. I'm not saying that having fun or resting is wrong, because they're necessary. But if they become a way to escape from a reality we don't like, then maybe it's time to ask ourselves, is this really the life we want? Or are we just getting through the days, waiting for the next escape? And yes, being brutally honest, if we discover that it's the second option, are we just getting through the days, waiting for the next escape? Then what could we actually change in our daily routine to stop feeling that constant need to run away every week? If you enjoyed this content,
Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and leave a comment below. Thank you, and see you in the next video. Goodbye!